It's December 8th, 1660, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
If you were an English theatre lover in the first half of the 1600s, the only place you'd expect to see a woman would be in the audience or selling oranges. That all changed today in history in 1660, when an actress named Margaret Hughes, probably, but we'll get to that, strutted out on stage to offer London theatregoers a novelty, a female character played by a real-life lady.
Yeah, and the prologue to the performance was written by the English poet, playwright and prolific royalist pamphleteer Thomas Jordan, and it's particularly fun. It starts out like this. I came unknown to any of the rest to tell the news. I saw the lady dressed. The woman plays today, mistake me not, no man in gown or page in petticoat. A woman to my knowledge, yet I can't, if I should die, make affidavit on it. So he's basically saying, okay, everyone, prepare yourselves. Here comes an actual genuine, haven't actually checked her bits, but here's a genuine woman on the stage.
And it was like a special effect, really, wasn't it? It was prepare yourself to see something amazing, not a page in a petticoat, but an actual real-life woman. And the reason this happened in this year of 1660, that will already be triggering you, British history fans, 1660, the restoration of the monarchy, God save the king, is because this is the year that not only is Charles II back, the royals are back, but also the restoration of theatres too, after 16 years of Cromwell. And it's fascinating how the debut of women on stage is tied in with that kind of release from Puritanism that people obviously felt. You know, you see playbills from this era kind of proclaiming, not performed for 16 years, it's Troilus and Cressida. People are so excited to be back in the theatres, and specifically Charles and the royalists, who'd been living in exile in France and loved theatre because that's what you did for entertainment in the 1600s, had become familiar with watching women performing on stage in Europe. It's a bit like kind of the Chinese or the Saudis, you know, seeing on the internet what's happening in the West and wanting it themselves. Like they'd gone and lived in France and they were like, oh, they've had women on the stage for 100 years. Can't we just do that too? And they was like, yes, actually, I'm the king now, so yes, we can.
Yeah, and there was also a slight concern. People were starting to wonder if all those cross-dressing love scenes weren't a little bit fruity, and whether it was really setting the right example to have so many bedroom scenes involving, you know, grown men and pages in petticoats. And you can see too that the theatre was just starting to sort of flourish again in the location of this performance. It was a place called the Vere Street Theatre, which was still known to some on this day by its original name, which was Gibbon's Tennis Court. So Thomas Killigrew, the manager of the King's Company Theatre Troupe, had just remodelled this. It had been a tennis hall, and he'd, you know, rebranded it into a theatre now that theatre was allowed again. And obviously, we know what better way to draw attention to it than with a splashy stunt like a lady actor. And the performance was Shakespeare's Othello. Again, you know, after 16 years, you can dust off some of those classics that people saw a lot of when they came out. And she was playing the role of Desdemona.
So out came this woman who was definitely a woman, but the curiosity from a historical perspective is that no one actually thought necessarily to record which woman it was. There is the suggestion that the woman in question was Margaret Hughes, as you said, Rebecca, but scholars have had to just pick up whatever scraps of evidence that they can find lying around, which is why there's no direct certainty about who the person was. Margaret Hughes herself was celebrated for her beauty and her stage presence because she certainly was an actor who went on to do plenty of stuff on the stage. It's just not clear if she was the first female actor ever to perform. The diarist Samuel Pepys rather lasciviously describes her as a mighty pretty woman.
Not Pepys.
Doesn't sound like him.
I know. How dare he? Yeah, that's so out of character.
As I sat in mine seat, fondling mine boner, watching Othello, I mused.
But she was reputedly a great beauty with dark ringleted hair, a fine figure, and particularly good legs, according to history. But she was probably also most well known for who she shacked up with, or at least was rumoured to have shacked up with. Pepys suggested that she was romantically involved with Sir Charles Sedley, who was a noted dramatist and a famous fop, according to Pepys, during the 1660s. But also Hughes is rumoured rumoured to have had a brief affair with Charles II. That's totally unproven. But she's definitely known to have been the lover of Prince Rupert of the Rhine, who was a senior member of the royal family. And Rupert fell for Hughes in the late 1660s, but she reportedly held off from reciprocating his affections, basically to secure a better kind of settlement for her, shall we say, love. And so Rupert's patronage was the thing that allowed her to join the king's company in 1669, and she really went on to have an enormously successful career from then.
I think maybe some of the reticence to record the name of the actress would be that there was, as you were saying, like some disquiet about the sort of lasciviousness of the content that went on in a theatre when it was boys playing girls. But when you have girls playing girls and doing some of the things that Shakespeare's women do, i.e. kissing the men on stage, plotting to kill them in sexual ways and all the rest of it, that's not necessarily at this stage in history a respectable job for a woman from high society to have. So where do you find your actresses? A brothel is not going to do it. The audience may have seen these women as being no better than prostitutes. But actually, if you're going to play Desdemona, you need to be able to read. You need to be able to memorize lines at speed. You need to have a lot of emotional depth. You need to have some experience of the class of person you're playing. So who do you end up going with? Because respectable women aren't going to be actors at this point. So what you end up with is basically the daughters of once respectable families whose family have come down in the world, or the illegitimate daughters of gentlemen. And so I can understand why people wouldn't be like, let's celebrate this person. I think there's probably still a slight reticence at this point. It's like, is this an okay thing to say? Are we going to elevate this person to celebrity because they're not from the highest echelons of society and this is for the king?
Yeah, and I think that said, not to play down the significance of this moment, but maybe one of the reasons was that while this was a novelty, it was kind of breaking a glass ceiling on public theatre performance in England. It wasn't as if the mere concept of a woman acting would in itself be, causing monocles to pop out, because most people of this era would have seen women perform in public in some capacity. So for the lower classes, that might be in religious or civic pageants, or kind of the sort of low rent entertainment you'd have in taverns and marketplaces. And for better off people, this was a time when a lot of entertainment was enjoyed in the home or in the homes of family and friends. Women would have been among those entertaining their loved ones with poems and songs and recitations. We've got lots of accounts of queens and ladies in waiting and princesses performing in pageants, for their family, for the court.
This what happened during Cromwell's era, isn't it? You couldn't go out to the theatre, so you had to stay at home, Shakespeare and chill.
Yeah, well, exactly. And even in private settings, you could have hired female performers. We know of an acrobatic dancer called Matilda Makejoy, one assumes a stage name, who performed for Edward I and Edward II several times around the turn of the 14th century. But that said, there was a strong taboo on women publicly exhibiting themselves outside of sanctioned settings like the private court. And that was because it was seen as being a direct invitation for unknown people to look at you, which, seen through a certain rigid worldview, was tantamount to prostitution.
Well, and this is the subtext even on this day in history. That prologue that Arion quoted earlier actually continues. Have modest thoughts of her. Pray, do not run to give her visits when the play is done. Which is basically saying, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, here you are, lads, feast your eyes on this. And it launched an unfortunate tradition where gentlemen of means could go backstage and perv on the actresses, which continued for decades, including Pepys. He went backstage to Nell Gwyn's dressing room in one of his diary entries and found her, quote, all unready and, quote, very pretty, prettier than I thought.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the other actresses who could have been Desdemona on this day, one of the names that's been put forward, is an Anne Marshall. She and her sister Rebecca also performed in the King's Company, Thomas Killigrew's theatre troupe. And one of them, we're not sure who, because they only refer to her as being, Miss Marshall, also performed in Killigrew's all-female revival of a filthy comedy of his called The Parson's Wedding. The women played male parts, and it included extremely racy jokes and a lot of cross-dressing sort of sex scenes. And the cast of that did include a newcomer to the stage at the time, Nell Gwyn, who was 14 years old at the time. And so you've now got this sort of back and forth on the stage, which sort of starts to make people see the distinction between what happens on stage and what happens off stage, which sort of helped people to understand that there was a bit of a distinction between what you saw happening on stage and what you saw happening off stage.
And you get some female creatives as well. Afra Ben starts being produced as a playwright, although rather mocked and sidelined. But women tended to write plays that did give women some more lines and some more central roles. Spare a thought, though, for the pretty boys. You had these people who had built a career playing girls. Luckily, most of them were quite flexible and retreated into playing masculine roles. Edward Kynaston was the most famous, known for playing beautiful women. A few weeks after Today in History, he went on stage as Otto in The Bloody Brother, having appeared as the heroine Arthiope in the same play only a few weeks previously. So, it's like, well, the audience like him, but can he play the man? But he did manage to.
Yeah, and I kind of think that gets to why, even though a lot of people did continue to have misgivings about the propriety of having women on the stage, theatregoers fundamentally just appreciated the verisimilitude that female actresses brought to female roles. And Pepys wrote in 1667, and I just think this is a really funny understatement, "To the theatre, and there saw the scornful lady, now done by a woman, which makes the play appear much better than it ever did to me." And I was like, who'd have thought?
Now,
This episode first aired last year exclusively to members of Club Retrospectors.
Join today and unlock a new episode this Sunday.
Patreon.com/retrospectors.